My phone buzzed at midnight. A message from my parents. We know you covered the $520,000 to save the house, but your sister doesn't want you at Thanksgiving. No call. No explanation. Just a cold line glowing in the dark of my apartment. I stared at the screen, typed one word, received, and quietly ended my role as the family's punch ing bag. And what came next? Their perfectly planned Thanksgiving collapsed, and I didn't have to do a thing. But that was only the start. Before I tell you the whole story, tap like and comment where you're tuning in from. Also tell me, have the people you love ever taken you for granted? When you share your stories, I feel less alone in mine. Most of my life, being the dependable one wasn't a decision I made. It was a label handed to me without asking. I'm Iris Bennett, 34, a tech professional in Seattle where my routines are calm, consistent, and organized, the complete opposite of my family. I grew up in a home where logic came second to avoiding conflict. And avoiding conflict meant shielding my younger sister, Maya, from the messes she caused. Maya was the golden child from the start. Brilliant, charismatic, magnetic. The type who received praise simply for existing. When she desired something, she didn't request it, she assumed it. And my parents always gave in. If she made a mistake, they cleared the wreckage. If she blew through money, they filled the gaps. If she upset someone, she was just expressive. Meanwhile, I learned to be calm, helpful, reliable. I became the fixer of appliances, budgets, and broken promises. My name stayed listed as the emergency contact, not because I wanted to be, but because the alternative was watching everything crumble. Then, 6 months ago, the downfall almost came. My parents called me crying, voices trembling as they confessed the truth. They were months behind on payments for the lake house they'd cherished for years. Maya had been borrowing again, draining their retirement to fund her sudden splurges and half-baked business dreams. On top of that, they'd made risky money moves to hide the problem, hoping no one would find out. They were on the brink of losing their home within weeks. I didn't think twice. I cashed out investments I'd spent 15 years growing, sold the rental place I'd poured my time and energy into, and shifted funds I had set aside for my own future. When it was all done, I had transferred $520, then $1,000. No conditions, no hesitation. My lawyer pushed for paperwork to protect everyone, and my parents, scared and thankful, signed every single page, without a moment of pause. For a little, while life seemed steady again, Maya slid right back into her old habits. Designer outfits, flashy updates, a new career venture every couple of weeks. My parents waved it off, claiming she was figuring herself out the same excuse they'd leaned on for years. And I kept reminding myself it wasn't my job to step in anymore. Yet there were little signs, conversations that didn't include me, family pictures I wasn't asked to be part of, vacations where I was apparently too busy to be invited. And every single time, a quiet thought crept in. I'm the one who kept this roof over your heads. Why am I the one excluded? I buried it, insisting I was being unreasonable. But that patience, that denial, all of it shattered the night they sent that message. The night they told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving because Maya didn't want me there. The night the line was finally crossed. I must have reread that Thanksgiving text a dozen times, not because it was unclear, but because I couldn't wrap my head around how casual it sounded. Like asking me not to come was as simple as reminding me to bring. Hi, we appreciate the $52,000 you paid to save our home, but your sister would rather you skip dinner. No apology, no conversation, just a decree made about me, without me, delivered through a bright screen after midnight. I sat, frozen. I waited for the usual excuses to rise up in me, the instinct to defend them, to justify their choices, to shrink myself so Maya could stay comfortable. I waited for the guilt, the self-blame, the voice whispering they didn't mean it like that. But something Different surfaced instead silenced the kind that comes right before the storm. Then my phone lit up again. Maya this time. Her message was shorter, colder, almost indifferent. It's not personal. I just want a drama-free night. You can. Be a lot. Let's do lunch next week. A lot. I stared at that word until it went fuzzy. I wasn't a lot when I sold my rental property so our parents wouldn't lose their house. I wasn't a lot when I covered her credit card disaster and kept it from everyone. I wasn't a lot when I drove 2 hours at midnight to rescue her after yet another failed business scheme. But now I was too much simply because she couldn't control the one person who refused to be used. That I felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping up my spine. Clarity. I typed back a single word, noted. No anger, no sarcasm, just finality. For the first time in years, that one syllable didn't feel like surrender. It felt like a boundary locking into place. It felt like choosing myself. I set my phone down and walked across the loft, the hardwood cool beneath my bare feet. I opened the small safe tucked in the corner, something I seldom touched. Inside sat a simple folder, thin but heavy with significance. Months ago, when I paid off the house, my attorney, Daniel, had insisted on a formal agreement. Not out of mistrust, but for protection. My parents' hands trembled as they signed each page. They barely glanced at it, simply holding my hands and whispering that I had saved them. That folder held every signature, every clause, every timeline, including the one giving them 6 months to either repurchase the house at market value or start paying rent. 6 months, and Thanksgiving marked the last week. I traced my fingers along the edges of the papers. For years, my family relied on the fact that I would never resist, that I would always be the dependable one, the forgiving one, the easy one. But as I stood there, folder in hand, I realized something clear. They had mistaken my silence for acceptance. This time, they were about to learn otherwise. The folder felt heavier than ordinary paper should. Maybe because it carried every moment of my family's imbalance, every quiet sacrifice I made, every boundary I never drew, every apology I swallowed when I should have walked away. I carried it to my desk and laid it flat, the pages glowing under the loft's soft light. For years, I had convinced myself that patience, reason, and generosity would eventually make a difference. That one day, my parents would understand the difference between love and convenience. But staring at that agreement, something inside me settled. They already had all the proof they needed. They simply chose to ignore it. I opened my laptop, its pale light filling the room, and accessed a digital folder labeled Records. Inside were months of quiet documentation, screenshots, payments, bills, bank statements showing transfers from my parents' accounts covering Maya's spending. I had never collected them to use as a weapon. I kept them because I was done being the only witness to the truth. As I scrolled through the files, the silence around me thickened, almost electric. My phone buzzed once on the desk. A message from Maya, but I ignored it. Instead, I clicked Daniel's contact and hit call. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. Irisa, everything okay? No, I said calm. But it will be. I need to start the process. A pause. Then sharper, the house. Yes, send the notice before Thanksgiving. Another pause, longer this time, as if he was measuring whether I truly meant it. You're sure? I'm done being taken for granted, I said. The words felt steadier than I truly was, but once out, they felt right. Solid, anchored. All right, he said. I'll have everything ready in the morning. When the call ended, I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been holding my breath all along. My loft felt strangely different, almost lighter, even though nothing about it had physically changed. The shift was inside me. It was the moment a boundary long ignored finally took shape. I moved to the window, gazing at the city below, Seattle's lights scattered like tiny, fragile promises. Cars moved steadily along the streets, people heading home, completely unaware that my family and my life had quietly pivoted on its axis. Behind me, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Sweetheart, don't be upset. This is just easier for your sister. We'll make it up to you later. Later. A word I had known all my life. A word that had always meant never. I closed the message without a reply. Thanksgiving was just days away. Maya was meticulously planning her perfect evening. The one where she would play the flawless hostess, bask in attention, and pretend the universe revolved around her. My parents would orbit her as usual, smoothing every corner, protecting her image, ignoring all the cracks. But not this year. This time, the consequences would arrive at their doorstep, wrapped not in anger but in the cold precision of the legal terms they had signed themselves. And they would receive it at the exact moment they least expected, silently, elegantly, inevitably. Thanksgiving morning came shrouded in the thick, cold Seattle fog, the kind that makes the lake seem like it's exhaling. Inside my parents' house, however, there was nothing serene. Maya had been awake since dawn, perfecting a holiday she believed would impress her colleagues. She had invited people she wanted to convince she was more accomplished, more successful, more stable than she really was. She wore a cream dress, her hair styled in soft waves that framed her carefully rehearsed smile. She moved through the kitchen, barking out orders, adjusting table settings, correcting my mother's placement of silverware, reminding my father to act natural when the guests arrived. My parents flitted around her, half exhausted, half proud, completely oblivious to what was coming. They had no idea a delivery had already been scheduled. Not flowers, not food, not decorations. Something entirely different. They had no idea I wasn't sitting at home, brooding or nursing some wounded pride. I was exactly where I needed to be. Somewhere quiet, somewhere private, somewhere far enough to hear my own thoughts without the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. I checked the time. 11:42 a.m. Right on schedule. Back at the lake house, Maya's colleagues started arriving, a couple from her firm, including her direct supervisor. They stepped inside, praising the decor she claimed to have arranged herself. She beamed at the compliments, soaking up every bit of validation. My mother murmured to a guest, almost apologetically, "Our older daughter isn't coming today. She needed some space." It was the same tone she always used when Maya slipped up, softening the truth, cushioning it so it wouldn't sting. Then the doorbell rang. A simple chime, but it split the holiday in two. "Mom, get that," Maya said, adjusting her dress. Probably the last dessert delivery. It wasn't. At the door stood a man in a plain jacket, holding a sealed envelope and a flat package. "I have documents for Robert and Elaine Bennett," he said politely. My mother blinked, confused. "Oh, must be something else we forgot to order." He handed her the envelope, asked for a signature, and left quietly. No drama, no raised voices, just a subtle delivery of consequences. My father leaned over her shoulder, frowning at the legal letterhead. "This is from Daniel, Iris's attorney." The room went silent, not because anyone understood immediately, but because they recognized the name. "Open it," Maya said lightly, still half smiling. "Maybe it's nothing." But as the envelope tore open, her smile wavered. Inside were 3 sets of documents, a formal reminder of the agreement they had signed, a notice marking the end of the 6-month grace period, and a detailed summary of every payment, bill, and transfer used to bail them out financially. Payments that all traced back to me. My mother's hands trembled as she unfolded each page. "Rent," she whispered. "Market value, starting immediately." My father skimmed the pages, color draining from his face. "Or we have to buy the house back." "Elaine, this isn't optional. We agreed to this." Maya stepped forward, snatching a page from his hand. "What do you mean? Rent? This is our home." "It's not," my father said quietly. "It hasn't been for 6 months. Iris owns it." The words hit the room like a punch. Even Maya's supervisor looked shocked. "She wouldn't actually enforce this," my mother said, panic rising. "She's just upset." But then she reached the final page, the one outlining the timeline. Thanksgiving Day was the deadline. Not next week, not next month. Today. And just as the panic began to take hold, Maya noticed something else. The signature at the bottom of the agreement. Hers. "What is this?" She cried out. "Why is my name here? I didn't sign this." "You did," My father's voice snapped, breaking in a way it hadn't in years. You signed as a witness the day Iris cleared the mortgage. You were right there. You said you'd read it later. Mia's face drained of color. Her supervisor pushed up his glasses, scanning the document more carefully. You said your family situation was stable, he said slowly. You said you were helping your parents through a temporary setback. I am, Maya stammered. This must be some kind of mistake. But he barely glanced at her. His attention stayed on the evidence packet. The transfers, the withdrawals, the payments covering Maya's designer purchases and failed ventures. Things she had insisted were paid for with her personal savings. It was all unraveling faster than she could respond. My mother turned to my father in alarm. Call her. Call Iris now. They tried. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I watched silently from my seat, unmoving. Then my father tried again, then my mother, and finally Maya, her fingers trembling as she frantically dialed. By the time my phone stopped buzzing, I had more than 30 missed calls. I finally answered. Hello. My voice was calm. Too calm. Iris, my father exhaled. We received something. You didn't need to do this. Not today. Not like this. You told me not to come, I said simply. I respected that. My mother's voice cracked as she jumped in. Sweetheart, please. This is a misunderstanding. Mia didn't mean. Maya cut her off sharply, snatching the phone. What you're doing is insane. You're ruining Thanksgiving. You're destroying my reputation in front of my colleagues. There it was. The truth. Not regret, not apology. Embarrassment. This isn't about your reputation, I said. This is about accountability. Accountability, she snapped. You're punishing us. No, I said. You punished yourselves. I'm just enforcing what we all agreed to. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could hear the soft clatter of dishes, the quiet shock spreading through the room, the realization that the woman they'd taken for granted had stopped playing her part. Finally, my father exhaled. A sound of surrender. What do we do now? You have 2 options, I said evenly. Buy the house back or start paying rent. This is impossible, Maya whispered. You know we can't afford either. You could, I said, if you hadn't drained their accounts, used credit lines in their names, or pretended your expenses were investments. Her supervisor's eyes widened, confirming he'd seen the evidence too. My mother's voice wavered. You're doing this on purpose. You want to humiliate me. I don't, I said quietly. But I will no longer shield you from the truth. I let the words settle before continuing. This Thanksgiving was supposed to be your perfect day. And now, you're facing everything you worked so hard to hide. That's what happens when real consequences arrive. I could feel all 3 of them holding their breath. I ended the call with the same calm I had practiced the night I first read that message. I was done being overlooked. Before anyone could say another word, I hung up. Across the lake, in the house I now legally owned, the illusion of a perfect family gathering had crumbled. Not because I'd fought, but because I finally stopped shouldering the burden of their choices. In the days that followed, something shifted in my family that I'd never witnessed before. Silence. Not the cold, manipulative kind Maya wielded to grab attention. This was the silence of people finally forced to confront the truth. Thanksgiving ended in fragments. Maya's colleagues left early, their polite goodbyes barely concealing their discomfort. Her supervisor avoided eye contact, leaving with the evidence packet still fresh in his mind. The image she'd tried to project collapsed the moment those documents hit the table. My parents called again, not to plead, but to ask the questions they should have asked years ago. They began examining their finances, realizing just how deeply Maya's spending had eroded their stability. Shock turned to shame, and shame became something quieter, heavier: accountability. For the first time, they couldn't ignore the pattern. For the first time, they couldn't pretend it was harmless. And for the first time, they didn't expect me to fix it. I spent long walks through Seattle that week, breathing air that felt purer than anything I'd inhaled in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even relieved. What I felt was closer to balance, as if the world had finally stopped tilting toward everyone else's needs. A week later, my father asked for a meeting. No excuses, no guilt trips. Just honesty. He admitted they'd been blind, that relying on me had become too easy, too convenient. My mother apologized without wrapping it in love or sacrifice, simply acknowledging that they had failed to protect me while shielding Maya. They still didn't know what would happen with the house. Neither did I. But for once, that uncertainty wasn't mine to bear. For the first time as an adult, everyone was finally living with the consequences of their own choices. When my parents asked to meet again a week later, their voices sounded different. Smaller, gentler, more human than I'd heard in years. They didn't beg or bargain. They simply admitted the truth. They had taken my loyalty for granted, and now they were ready to rebuild without weighing it on my shoulders. As for Maya, the silence on her end spoke louder than any apology could. For once, she was the one facing the questions, no charm or excuses to hide behind. And as I stood there listening to my family speak honestly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The real kind. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts below.